On a particular section of the Familiars Consortium, family become what you are. And Familiars Consortium is broken into these 4 different parts. The first one is forming a communion of persons. The second part is serving life. The third part, participation in the development of society. And the fourth part is sharing in the life and mission of the church. And so this is the first of the 4 parts, forming a community of persons that I just want to focus briefly on. And the first and foremost community of persons that's stressed by the church is the communion that happens between spouses. That's first and foremost. When the communion of spouses is healthy, the kids are going to be healthy. But if that one falls apart, then there's nothing that can be a source of wounds so much as that division that happens between parents. The second community is the parents and their children, and then the third is with extended family. John Paul II and the Fathers declared something that the church has always taught since the time of Christ, that the first task of the family is to develop an authentic community of persons. The first task of the family, to develop a community of persons. And what does God's version of a perfect family look like? Relationships are first. Developing an authentic community of persons is the top priority. I think it's interesting to reflect on when Jesus was here on earth, where did he spend 90% of his life? It was with family in Nazareth. 90% of his life. 10% was those last 3 years that we hear about in the Gospels. 90% was at home in Nazareth with his mom, with his dad, just being a family. Relationships are the top priority of a trinity of persons. The vast majority of his stay on earth took place in the ordinary life of family, and maybe not quite so ordinary. A lot of times our perception of things is distorted by what the culture thinks family is supposed to be like. But Jesus teaches us another to prioritize relationships. And life gets busy. You know, all of us know this. And we can forget to reflect on this. And so we can ask ourselves a question as we're here in Jesus' presence. How are we doing prioritizing relationships first in our family life? What are the things that we may be prioritizing ahead of this? As I was reflecting on these relationships first, I was reflecting on growing up in my family, growing up in Friend. And a lot of the memories that I have, well, I wouldn't say a lot of the memories, but I remember growing up and just kind of feeling a sense of pain because I didn't have the latest fashion that the other kids had. I mean, I didn't have Guess jeans. I just dated myself, right? I didn't have the Jordans to play basketball with, like so many of my other team did. You know, I felt like I was just kind of on the outside of that circle. When we were going to football games, away games, I can remember, you know, just a sense of shame as everybody else on the team got up and they ordered from fast food, McDonald's, you know, their meals and things like that. And my head hanging low, I brought in my sack with my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I didn't get a car. I didn't get a new car at 16. The temperature in our house in wintertime was 60 degrees. My parents
felt like traveling for every away game what was something that they didn't want to do because they spent that time together in friendship with each other. We didn't get a lot of extra cash for things, and I hated that growing up. I hated that. I hated going to the dances in Milligan, Nebraska in a 1968 Dodge station wagon with wood paneling. But because of what my parents prioritized, they prioritized relationships first. Because of what they prioritized, every month or every summer for a month, we would take off as a family and we would have the entire month just to be with each other, and we would just point a direction. This summer we're going east, and we would stop off at all of these different campgrounds, sometimes a different campground a day. If the campground was great and it had a lake and there were lots of rocks that the boys could throw, that's where we would stay. But they had prioritized that time with family and were willing to sacrifice for that. And as I look back, I am so grateful. So grateful. They prioritize relationships. Here's something that John Paul II and the Fathers point out. To grow up with the correct attitude of freedom with regard to material goods is to adopt a simple and austere lifestyle. To be fully convinced that man is more precious for what he is than for what he has. Self-giving is the law that guides it and makes it grow. And I'm not saying, in order to be a great family, you have to go on vacations for a month in the summer. But I think it's worth reflecting on. Culture tells us to prioritize very differently than God does. And there are a couple memories that I have that were instrumental from my relationship with Jesus and for my vocation as a priest that came out of the austereness that my parents chose to live. My dad's an art teacher. They chose to have mom at home with us. And it's not every family called to that, but they chose that. And because of that, I grew up with a mom at home. And there was a safety, there was a security in that. But because of that, raising 6 kids on just an art teaching salary, there was an austereness to that my parents chose. And I remember they didn't want me to overhear this. They weren't intending me to overhear this. But I heard my parents talk about they just didn't have money to pay the bills, this particular month. And there was a debate, do we give 10% to the church this month? And if any parent would come to me as a priest and ask that question, I would say, no, you don't have to do that. But they chose to give 10%, not knowing how that was going to play out. And on the day that the bills were due, they received a check in the mail from my dad's parents who said they wanted to start giving their inheritance out early. And here was a check, and the check, not just the dollar, but to the cent, exactly what was due for those bills. And I just remember my mom's heart being so joyful. And for me as a child, that was transformative. If you put your trust in God, God comes through for you. I remember another time where I was at a football game, and my twin sister got hard contact lenses, and this was a big investment at the time. Her eyes are so bad, the contacts probably cost double. So she was up in the stands watching the game, and it was just, a short time after she had gotten these lenses, and she wasn't used to wearing them, and the wind was blowing. It was a freezing day, and the wind took one of those contact lenses and ripped it out of her eye. And, the hard contact lenses that aren't the disposable kind. And so the next day, Mom got all of us kids together. It's a Saturday, and she says, we're going to the football field, and we're going to look for this contact lens. And I thought, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? Okay, Mom's serious. Let's get in the station wagon. So we get down to the field, and we're looking under the stands, and, it still touches me. We're looking. Nothing. We're there for hours. Nothing. And so the kids are ready to go back home. I mean, after the first 5 minutes, but, we gave it a good half an hour. And so Mom and Dad are still looking, go ahead and walk home. And nothing. They didn't find, the contact lens. So the next day at Mass, Mom is praying, and there's a pull. Go back and check. And so she goes back to the field and has this pull. Look by the goalpost. The goalpost is a good 75 yards from the stands, 100 yards from the stands. And as she's there looking, something catches her eye. And it's this dumb contact lens. Unbelievable. The priorities that God asked of my parents, they would be the first to admit they're not perfect. But the priorities that God asked them to make, oftentimes they did respond. And God worked through that in ways they never could have anticipated. They never could have anticipated that would have been such an instrumental thing in my vocation and my trust for God. And the culture doesn't understand this. That faithfulness to God opens up the door for real relationship with Him. The first communion is between husband and wife. By virtue of the covenant of married life, they are no longer two but one flesh, and they're called to grow continually in their communion through day-to-day faithfulness. Day-to-day faithfulness to God, who is always faithful to them. Day-to-day faithfulness to each other. Day-to-day faithfulness to their kids. in this promise of total mutual self-giving. As we're here, we reflect on the relationships that, first of all, Jesus desires with each of us as we're here in adoration. But the relationship that Jesus desires spouses to have with each other, the relationship that he desires them to have with their kids. And we open up in this prayer of surrender, saying, Jesus, please shine light on my heart, and please help me to know what you desire this to look like. Jesus, what do you desire relationships to be at the service of unity and communion? What do you desire this to look like in my family?